Tony Babbage, I'm the Director of Sales for Commend at Commend Americas. Just to give you kind of an idea of what we do, Commend is an audio and visual communication platform that serves enterprise global customer needs, more from an intercom public address, and now we're really getting into the digital signage piece as well too. So for reference of what we're talking about today, that's where my expertise comes in. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen a lot of different customers, had a lot of different conversations, work with our product management team on a lot of different initiatives. So that being said, we're talking today about integrated audio and visual communications for everyday use in times of crisis. I think that the industry as a whole is missing something major, and we'll talk about that during the presentation. So it's time to think a little bit deeper and different. So what we're getting from a lot of our customers, both on the government as well as the private sector, is everybody wants their devices to be multifunctional now. They want it to do more than just, for instance, intercom, push a button, talk to a person, let them in a door. They want their cameras to do much more than surveillance, right? That's happening today. That's live, it's going on everywhere, and most of that is add-ons that we've added onto our cameras like analytics, and we'll talk about that too. What are we using those for these days to get more out of a system than we are 10 years ago, right? Just the surveillance side of it. So everybody's looking for these multi-function, multi-purpose tools. So I found this awesome Swiss Army knife. Believe it or not, this is a real product. I found this online. If you want to buy it, it'll set you back about $9,000, so don't get excited. But the reality is, the more use we can get out of our systems, and usually that's not really what's sitting at the endpoint, that's what's sitting within the platform that we're using, the more we're going to be able to convince the people within our companies to spend the money on these things, right? Because a lot of times, if you're in the security space, our budgets aren't as big as we want them to be. So how do we apply business use case with those devices that we have to help solve other problems within a company? That opens us up to working with other departments to be able to get that funding that we might need. And we'll talk about that more from an audio perspective and a visual perspective today. So there's the part number if you want to order that for $9,000. I actually looked it up. It's discontinued, so there's a new version of it. I think it was actually even more. But here's the best part. There's 87 implements and 141 functions. And my favorite part was they still have the little toothpick, a little plastic toothpick on the end. So that was listed as one of the implements. So building the business use case, right? How are we, and I think video and access control have really done this very well over the past 10 years. It used to be you got a video system, use it for surveillance. Now it's being used, video is being used for all types of things, right? Occupancy data. So I know that the GSA is actually using occupancy data, not only from video, but also sensors, understanding how much buildings are being used, looking at is that real estate really necessary? Do we need to operate that real estate anymore? And deciding what to do to sell it off. They've been doing that for years now, probably over 10 years. LPR is another use case, right, that you're used to and seeing with cameras. Tracking customer behavior is something that's been done in retail, the retail sector forever. How often are people standing there and where do they use those end caps within a store to put products and product placement and prove that to the people putting their products there that they should spend and invest in that, right? In the security side, it's really object tracking, looking for violent behavior with analytics, crowd gathering, people counting, you name it. There's a ton of different applications. I'm probably only naming one of 100 or 1,000 that are out there. On the access control side, it's the same thing. Access control was built to let somebody in a door and decide what that access control is, but people started using it for other things, right? And the real difference today than 10 years ago is that we went from truly kind of a forensic system, something that you maybe went back to look up a piece of video to see what happened, to things that are happening in real time. They're being detected in real time and they need to be taken action in real time. There's a problem with this, and I'll discuss that here in a minute. But what about communication? Are people really using communication to the point where they need to today? I would say the answer is no. It's always been the third leg of the stool, right? There's always been access control and video, alarms, but communication is the piece that's vital, that's missing. And today it's going to be even more relevant because we need to take action on things right away. We're not going back and forensically looking at video. Video is telling us what's happening right now. It's detecting what's happening. How do we create situation awareness, not in the command center, but how do we do that on the ground, right? That's critical. I mean, of course, in the SOC or a GSOC, we can take a look at what's happening. We have access to cameras, calls are coming in. We know what's happening within the organization to a point. But what about that person on the ground that actually needs to know what's happening in real time? That's where I'm going to focus my attention today and talk about that a little bit more today. How do we communicate with the people on the ground, both audibly and visually, and what are some of the use cases? So how do we take event to action and actually do something about it on the ground? So how do we get the most out of our investment? That's really kind of what we're looking at doing, right? How do we get the most use out of our systems? The reality is it's about partnership. So it's kind of not on my topic, but the reality is if you're not talking to the manufacturers of these products, you're not sitting talking down to the systems integrator, we don't understand your problems, we can't help you. So as an industry, we need to do a better job, and I know a lot of you do. We need to do a better job of communicating, collaborating, working within these partnerships to really understand what those use cases are. What are you having problems with? And you don't have to spill out all your problems, but at least the important ones that you think that we can help, right? Because the more we know about some of the issues you're having and some of the challenges you face, the more as manufacturers and integrators we can come in and help you solve those. I know on the integration side, the integrators are oftentimes really heavily involved and embedded, and they really know what those problems are and they help you solve them. Same thing on the manufacturing side. So it's about partnership and about communication, right? So when you're choosing a platform, you obviously want to choose something that is, has a lot of different peripherals, things that are, the endpoints themselves are important, but it's not really what the endpoints are, it's what it's connected to, right? What are the pieces that it's connected to so I can be able to, use all the different services that are available to me to create some sort of outcome, right? In the communication space, you have kind of hybrid on-prem and cloud, but then you also have cloud services that are using technologies right now that can take speech to text, takes text into natural language processing, and be able to use that not only to understand what people are asking for, but also to be able to respond to people in a way that is completely automated. So our communication in the future, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is taking us from a position where people communicate to people, where people are going to start communicating more to a system, a robot, a voice bot, to get help and understand things. Because once you teach a voice bot something, it knows it. And the more you teach it, the more it knows. And the more questions you ask it, the more you understand what we need to teach the voice bot so you can get that response. There's a lot of use cases in that, and we'll talk about that here too. So what is the art of the possible? What's possible today, right? I want to talk about that. This is more on the audio side, right? So this is something we've been doing for quite some time, right? Perimeter detection. Somebody is walking up at nighttime. There's motion detection, whether it's on a camera or motion detector. And it basically just sends an autonomous message for somebody coming at a gate to let them know that, there's some surveillance here, right? May deter him. This guy's not deterred at all. He doesn't care. He's going to keep walking. Second level, right? Go to the SEPTED model. Second level is, just have some automatic warning message, some lights go on. But now that is coming up as alert in the SOC. Now the person in the SOC can obviously talk to that person. There's speakers and microphones out there and whatnot to be able to deter that person from entering the facility. It's a proactive intervention. Something we've been doing for quite some time, something you're probably already doing already, something that's possible. Situation resolved. Imagine that guy didn't walk away. Now you got this guy in an SOC, it's 1,000 miles away or even 2 miles away. How do you let the people on the inside of the building know that something's going on? How do you automate that process? How do you take it to the next level? There's pieces of technology that allow you to do that today. So if you look at another use case, a production line, right? There's all kind of video analytics out there right now that can tell if somebody's wearing a hard hat, tell if a forklift is coming down an aisle. It can tell me whether somebody's too close to a piece of equipment and they're in some sort of danger. But what it's not doing is really alerting that person that's actually in that situation. So you see here, you've got 3 people. One person's not wearing a hard hat. Okay? I can detect it on camera. I can use video analytics to do that. But how do I inform this guy that he needs to He's been sitting there staring at his tablet, like we all do, staring at his phone. Probably got lost in his day, goes out on the production floor to check on something, and he doesn't have his hard hat on. Well, video analytics, we can detect that event. That event gets sent into a system, and we basically have visual and audio communication to put that hard hat back on. It's a compliance thing, honestly. If the compliance measures say, I need to have a hard hat on, and you're caught without that hard hat, there's fines associated with it. There's all kinds of things that could happen. But the reality is we want to just drive compliance with our employees. And if I go back and forensically say, hey, I got an alert from a video analytic and you weren't wearing your hard hat, what happens if that person actually got injured, right? So it's actively deterring and actively detecting, actively informing people on what they need to do. Same thing, I don't know if anybody here is from the transportation industry. One of the biggest problems they have right now is track detection, people on the track. Can't really detect whether it's a person that is a customer or it's an actual employee. There's video analytics right now through different means of reiterative AI to be able to tell whether this is an actual employee or it's just a person that got pushed on a track. But after a few months of running it through these processes, it starts to learn better and better of what it actually is seeing on the track. Well, what good is it if I can see somebody's on a track and I can't communicate to that person? Or I can't communicate to the people on the platform that somebody's on the track. That person just goes down lane. I've seen plenty of videos on Instagram where somebody gets pushed on a track or they fall on a track and they're just sitting there for 5 minutes. How do we let the people on the platform know once this is detected? That's pretty simple. You just put in audio and visual signage, you tie into that and be able to notify them. Again, nothing, that's difficult to do, but I just don't think that we're doing it very well. We need to do a better job. So there's that side of it, right? And that's how do we get the most investment out of our things we're putting at the door? So we're an intercom company, right? So I'm going to talk about that in general. A lot of the interfaces we have are not just audio, it's audio and video and signage that comes with the actual intercom itself. So the future is multi-sensory. As we go into the future, there's going to be, as we interface, a lot of these calls are no longer going to be going into a person. They're going to be going into a voice bot. That voice bot is going to try to get help for somebody or answer the question they have or let them in a door through some sort of authorized access model. And if they can't help them, it'll actually transfer a person. But how do we take all those calls that really shouldn't be going to a person and take them into voice bot to answer those? So really, it's the audio and video piece and the user interface, which is important. So we're trying to take this information and just make it more efficient, create more safety, and really close the loop on event to action, right? So when these events are happening, what action do I need to take? How do I automate that process for the person that is on the ground? So if you just look at just an example, I'm not trying to sell you a product, but these are great stations, just so you know. A lot of what is being developed now is audio, video, and digital signage. It's a truly interactive experience that sits at a door or at a gate. So we started developing, we said, okay, what do we do with this? It's a piece of software. Well, the first thing is, if I'm at a door, I want to be able to call somebody. I can scroll through a screen, touch a button and call somebody, or I can multi-level menu it if I have a lot of people I need to contact. Then we said, well, what's next? Well, what if the list gets too long? We created a search function. What happened after that? We said we have a screen here that we can do anything with. What do we want the software to do next? We said, well, how about advertising? We'll be able to create some revenue with it. That's fine. In most cases, most companies don't want to use it for advertising. What they're starting to use it for is policy and procedure, and I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. What about in some sort of event? How do we change the screen to adapt around a situation? And this is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting, right? So if I have some sort of emergency, we're not just changing the way, we're not just changing the screen itself to say something different. We're changing where the calls route. So maybe normally it just routes into a desk on the inside, but now calls are routing to a whole separate place based upon this type of emergency. You're really helping and assisting people in the way they need to be. And then bidirectional video is the other piece that's really taken off, especially on this side. People want the level of comfort knowing that they're talking to somebody, and sometimes in a really stressful situation, it helps them calm down. So that's something we're seeing a lot of growth in as well, too. So event to action, adaptive workflow for business process. So you want to be able to create workflows, and those workflows need to be something tied to whatever that event is. So I'll just give you a few examples. I have this intercom or whatever, this communication device sitting at a loading dock, right? And normally, during normal hours, I push a button, I talk to somebody on the inside. But what happens after hours, right? Somebody still may need to get in the building. At 5 o'clock, we send a message, the screen changes, and basically tells them the call no longer goes to the loading dock desk, it goes down to security, right? Just adapting the interaction. What about changing on the fly? If I need to leave my desk, I need to go do something, or if I'm in a nursing floor and all of a sudden something happens and there's an emergency, I don't want calls to come in the nursing floor anymore. I need to go down to security to be able to handle that problem. Simply push a button and the entire operation of the system changes, right? Another example is using signage and using digital signage basically to let people know that if they're coming into a warehouse area or a dock door, and the dock door is usually closed these days, especially when you get into cities. A truck will pull in, they'll close the door. People like to rush in there and start stealing stuff. We've seen a lot of that lately. But how do we notify the people outside with visual and audible signaling that if they're pulling up in a truck, they just need to go park in a certain area? Again, just giving visual assistance and guidance for those types of situations, which wasn't possible really before. They talk about audio-visual compliance for regulatory use. This really doesn't have much to do with intercom, but it's just another use case. I talk about those multifunctional tools. How else do we use that thing sitting at the door to drive compliance, right? We as humans, when it comes to cybersecurity, we are the problem, right? I mean, we are the vulnerability. We're the ones that, out of all these IoT, OT, and physical security devices, usually we're the ones that are either accepting an email or not programming something correctly or doing something that isn't necessarily within policy to cause vulnerabilities in the network. So how do we prevent that, right? How do we fix that? Well, what happened was we created regulations, right? So NIST, you take the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? And a lot of the different regulations were built upon this framework, and I know you guys all know that. But if you look at something like NERC CIP or FISMA or HIPAA High Trust, any of these regulations, what do they require? Training, right? Training of the people that are there. So a lot of training requirements, CIP 4, NIST 853, there's AT 1 through 3, HIPAA High Trust, Domain 1 through 14. Really the key is training people and automating the processes so that it's not being handled by humans. The more we can do that, the less vulnerabilities we have because the less mistakes that will come. Now you may say, well, how the heck does that really translate over to intercoms? Come on, Tony, like what are you talking about? This is something that's really starting to catch on, especially in our energy and utility customers. Something as simple as using the device to have messages that scroll every 5 seconds all over the building that just talk about their responsibility to comply to those regulations, the cybersecurity, the escort policies, them wearing identification, just these constant reminders. It's so simple, but it's something that needs to be done in order to educate humans of what they need to do. No tailgating, that's a big one, right? So there's some technology out there. I don't know if you guys saw it with Orion. They're using LiDAR to detect tailgating, right? So if you have one tailgating offense in a NERC CIP environment, it could be $1 million fine, right? So how do we prevent that? So they're using their technology to sense it, but the next level of that is they can sense somebody going in a door, walking behind them, and it creates an alarm, but it doesn't create an alarm for the person at the door. So we're working with them right now is how do we use these devices to then change the screen, let them know that they're tailgating, also broadcast a message so they maybe stop, take a step out, save $1 million, and be able to prevent that from happening in the future, right? People don't do it on purpose. They do it because they just don't remember. We all have stuff going on in our lives. We all forget about things. We all, we all have our own struggles and or sometimes lost in our own minds or whatever. We're looking at our phone. We're just not paying attention. These violations are critical to avoid. I know that one of our customers in the data warehousing or the data center space, if they have more than 3 violations with this rule, they're fired. It not just includes them, it includes the contractors. Usually it's the contractors who are guilty of this. It's not necessarily the employees. But again, these constant reminders are important for these types of regulations. So how do you use this type of technology during emergencies? Simple, right? Let's put a map. Possibly they don't have it on here, but we can put a map of how people evacuate in a tornado, in a fire, in an active shooter scenario, right? We can adaptively change the screens. We can remind people that certain places, if there's server maintenance going on, you're not allowed in the server room. Again, it just takes it, and so you literally can't even get into the door anymore, right? So it shuts off the access control, shuts off the ability to call, just lets the person know why can't they get in the door. These are very simple rules that we can create around business rules. And then just letting people know that security breaches are detected. So again, it's not really the peripheral devices. I mean, those are there. They're there to see, right? There's cameras. From a audio standpoint, they're there to communicate, but it's really the back end power of it. So the intelligence lives at the edge to a point, but most of that intelligence is either in the cloud or it's on-prem, and being able to connect those devices to these platforms is critical to make these things happen. And from there, as we go forward, the automation interfaces, the APIs that are being written today make it much easier for these manufacturers to partner with each other and solve some of these problems. So I mentioned that solution where they're using LiDAR. So Orion is the company that's doing that. We can easily take these and use these applications to create just a better outcome. So what's the future of communication? I already kind of talked about this. I already mentioned it before, but really it's virtual assistant. And this is something that's growing, and we're seeing more applications for virtual assistants in the future. That's me talking to something, and that's something responding to me, right? So what we've done is basically we've taken and used the best of breed technologies within Microsoft, AWS, Google, taking speech to text, putting in natural language processing, taking that, putting translation engines into it, so if somebody's speaking Spanish, it comes out English on the other end. Logic controls, and then connecting APIs to third-party systems, right? And we've created a conversational workflow with there, and then it takes all that information because the speech is going into text, and it's basically using that for reporting and admin data. So you can start building your own internal knowledge database, right? So think about that. You have SOPs, right? You have standard operating procedures. You have to train people on those operating procedures, but a lot of different things happen, and sometimes people just don't know what to do. So if you can ask a digital assistant what that response is supposed to be and what that SOP is, that's another good use case for it, right? You can also connect to external databases. So looking up things in the transportation sector, if I want to go from this station to that station, it knows I'm at that station because it's a fixed device and basically responds with the instructions on how to get there, what the next train time is, and everything else that will go along with that. So it's training those skills, and as you add and train more of those skills, the more this voice bot can do. So it's solving a lot of problems for a lot of different customers. So what can it do today? It's really a lot of different things, right? So it's something that responds right away. So normally in a security operations center, it takes about 30 seconds to answer a call. It's just on the data that we have. The best one to answer a call usually in 7 seconds, but 30 seconds is pretty typical. Some are a minute, but it answers right away. We can take call handling, frequently asked questions. I think the multilingual interface is probably one of the biggest things. And then the use case automation, data and insights. So the data and insights to me is probably the most exciting thing. We're basically taking all of that information that's coming in and be able to create dashboards, heat maps, things like that. But the most important thing is intent recognition. So as people are asking questions or need something, it doesn't have to be just people calling an SOC. It could be your own employees. Your employees could log into what we call commend.services. They can ask a question. And in response to that question, we then gather that data. We may not have the answer to it, but next time we could. So if we start gathering those intents, we realize, okay, 8% of the calls are coming in, so people need to know this. How do we solve that? How do we create an automation process to do that? You can do that within the digital voice assistant. It can respond in that way. And just before I forget, if you want to experience that, it is sitting in the room next door at the Commend booth. We do have Ivy running, which is our digital assistant, and it can do so many things right now, but it can definitely answer certain questions. And like I said, with this system, as we speak, that speech turns into text. That text is then able to analyze, right? So the entire conversation flow is there. The recording's there. Everything you would need to be able to use the system is right in front of you. And then you can start searching for whatever the next use case is. So in this is a parking use case, right? So somebody wanted to actually turn around, they asked the operators, what's happening at this site? A lot of people are saying, well, people just pull in. It was a transient parking lot, basically. A lot of different people pull in that parking lot in Las Vegas. It's not like a business, parking garage where it's the same people coming every day. It's just different people every day from all across the world. They have no idea what they're doing, right? They show up. A lot of people want to turn around. So we just went and searched turnaround, right? And all these data points came up that we weren't able to find originally. And we were able to solve this problem not only for that one site, but across all the sites of this customer, which was about 7 or 8% of their calls. So that being said, I don't know if there's any questions on that, but really, I do think that the next real wave that's going to happen within security and within security technology is that ability to respond to that person that is on the ground. It's creating situation awareness at the site, not in the SOC. The only really way to do that is with audible and visual communication. So keep that in mind as you're designing your systems, is how do we help those people, as it's critically important. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Take care.